No, unfortunately, our master of ceremonies, Manoj, has had to leave due to some unexpected, unplanned events. Therefore, I am standing in for him. It also happens that I'm the moderator for the next speaker, Deepak Sapra. Uh, Normally, the master of ceremonies would have introduced me, but I don't think I will take much time introducing myself. But I'll use the opportunity to introduce the Rail Enthusiast Society, which is organizing this program. The Rail Enthusiast Society is a society of rail enthusiasts, for rail enthusiasts, and by rail enthusiasts. It all started in 2015 when some of us had got together after a very successful, profitable book called Indian Railways, More Miles, More Smiles had been published. It went off so well that we were celebrating, and then this question came up that in our country we have physical magazines on virtually every subject under the sun, but we have nothing which is directed at rail enthusiasts. So why don't we start a magazine for rail enthusiasts? Of course, the railways does bring out magazines, but they are not for rail enthusiasts. They will talk more about current events and what the railways is doing. We wanted a magazine that will target the rail enthusiasts, talk about history, heritage, things like that. So I was prepared to start this magazine and bring it out. But then the question arose, what happens if something happens to me? The magazine will probably die. So then we decided that we will set up a society so that there is continuity for a long time to come. In December 2015, the Rail Enthusiast Society was incorporated, and in 6th August 2016, we brought out our first magazine, The Rail Enthusiasts. We are now on our 34th issue, and the 35th issue is with the printers now and should be out by the end of this month. Now, once we had a society, we decided to do other things also. Why just limit ourselves to bringing out a magazine? Today, we have monthly talks on subjects of railway interest every month. That could be by one of our members, it could be by anybody. Virtual talks, of course. Then we have this once a year conference. We organize guided rail trips. We organize visits to rail establishments, particularly for our members who are not railwaymen. And I must say something like 50% of our members are not in the railways. Unfortunately, most railwaymen are not rail enthusiasts. For them, it's only a job, and they're not passionate about the railways like a rail enthusiast is. So we are today more than 10 years old and having a fair amount of activity. And I hope that in the future, this activity will only increase. Now, with this brief introduction, I would like to mention that anybody can become a member. The only qualification is that you should be passionate about the railways, any aspect or all aspects. You can be young, old, male, female, whatever. I mean, there is no limitation at all, except that you should be passionate about the railways. To become a member, please write to me as secretary at railenthusiast2015@gmail.com. I'll repeat, railenthusiast, one word, 2015@gmail.com. And we will give you all details of how you can become a member. You can be in any country, anywhere in the world. Anyway, with that, we come to the next and the last talk of the day. The speaker happens to be Deepak Sapra. And like the earlier speaker I had introduced, Atulya Sinha, he was also my student when I was a professor at the Indian Railways Institute of Mechanical and Electrical Engineering. But unlike Atulya Sinha, he did not stay long in the railways. After a very brief service in the railways, which was mostly on the eastern railway zone of the Indian Railways, he left the railways, became a manager, and got into the corporate world. Today, Deepak Sapra is working with Dr. Reddy's Laboratories in Hyderabad and is their CEO, API and services. With that, he's been traveling all over the world. Last week, when I wanted to talk to him about today's talk, I found he was in China. When the COVID vaccine was being developed in India with the help of the Russian vaccine, he was the person who did all the negotiations. So he's today out of the railway world, but railways has remained his passion even now. A few years back, he produced a book called The Boy Who Loved Trains. And I can assure you, even today, he is the boy who loves trains. railway has remained his passion in spite of the fact that he's not working in the railways anymore. I will not take much time. So it's over to the Deepak.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah, you
Yes.
are.
Wonderful. And visible as well?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I have a tough act to follow after the wonderful presentation that we just heard, but I'll try to do my best as someone who's lived a part of the story that I'm going to narrate now over the next half an hour. So, my talk, let me actually share my screen and it'll help.
Perfect.
Is it visible? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Okay. So, the topic of my speech is three iconic trains, one India. And the reason I called it like this is because I have had the opportunity to somehow live each of these three trains in some different way. So these are not stories I observed from a distance. This is from the eyes of what I've lived through the years. So now I just request each one of you on the call to please close your eyes. Please close your eyes and listen to this.
So I'm not hearing anything.
Ah, okay. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. Okay, doesn't matter. It's I think it was not working. It was the sound of my daily life in 2001. And this was my daily life in 2001. I was 26 years old. I was a senior scale officer on the Indian Railways. At that point of time, on study leave to pursue my management course at IIM Bangalore, I was doing an internship which I had been awarded in Mumbai. So I used to live in Malad, a suburb on the Western Railway line in Mumbai with my sister. My internship was in a place in New Bombay called Nerul. So every day in the morning, I used to take an auto rickshaw from my sister's place to Malad station. It used to take about 7 minutes. Then take the Western Railway line to Dadar, cross over to the Central line at Dadar, take the Central line from Dadar to Kurla, and then shift from Kurla, and then take the Harbour line from Kurla to Nerul. Every day, every morning. And every evening, I would do the reverse. Three lines, Western, Central, Harbour. I used to spend a total of more than 3 hours on the train going to and fro every day. A part of it was with the traffic, a part of it was against the traffic. So Malad to Dadar was with the traffic because it's morning, everybody is going towards the city. And in the evening, the part from Dadar to Malad was with the traffic. The rest of the two legs of the journey were against the traffic. So I had the opportunity to observe life closely on the trains in the morning as well as the trains in the evening on each of the three lines, the Western line, the Central line, and the Harbour line. Now, what happens is that you get a lot of glimpses as you're going through the iconic Mumbai locals. I want to show you a few of those glimpses and then talk about those because that will give you a sense of what I'm trying to get at. So the first picture you see here, I hope some of you can recognize it. It's Bombay's most iconic breakfast. It's called vada pav, typically wrapped in a newspaper. At that point of time in the year 2001, it used to be sold between 7 rupees to 10 rupees at the railway premises. and tea. I think a very large portion of Bombay's breakfast on the trains used to be this vada pav, which I showed the picture here. And then, of course, you get into the train. This is not from my journey in 2001. I do not have the pictures from then, but these are pictures I've taken on Bombay trains thereafter. Of course, you see a lot of people coming around. This is when you're going in the opposite direction, not very crowded. Morning time, you have people reading up. You have a lot of people in, at least in 2001, used to catch up on the morning newspaper when the train was a little less crowded, which was especially the case when I was going from Kurla to Nerul. And then on the other side, you used to see trains cross by. So this is one glimpse which I wanted to share. The second glimpse which I want to share is this one. First, you can see there's a ladies special coach introduced by the railways in the early 90s. And what it did for Bombay was it created space. It created space for women to move in a manner that was relatively safer, that did not require the pushing and shoving that was otherwise necessary. And it also helped a lot of people access places and access the train system, which was not otherwise possible. The other picture I want to show here is something I used to see regularly on Dadar station. This is the Dabbawala. Those in India are obviously very familiar with it. Those outside India, so these are the lunch boxes which used to go on the trains from all parts of the city to where people used to work. So many a time people would leave home early, but subsequently the food would get prepared at home and then it would be transported to wherever the people were working through these dabbas, as they call it, these lunch boxes, which currently operate at Six Sigma levels without any GPS, without any AI, without any mobile phones. The next image I want to show you is of all the dabbas getting loaded once you come out of the station. So this is just outside the other station, dabbas getting loaded, and then subsequently there is a mechanism by which the dabbas would then move to the respective destinations. The next image is, of course, people waiting to get onto the train. As many of you would have experienced, people would get onto the train, start getting onto the train in a huge rush. There would be immense amount of crowding when the train kind of gets into the platform, and many a time the official capacity of a train is about 1,500 to 1,600 passengers. At peak hours, the train is carrying close to 5,000 people. Indian Railways does have a terminology for this. That terminology is called super dense crush load, and that is what is usual when you are going with the traffic. But in spite of the super dense crush load, I think there is an etiquette to the Bombay local. You don't push, you kind of get absorbed into the train. The crowd at the door somehow makes space, not much, maybe a few inches. You fit yourself into those few inches. The train moves and you're in. So, you would have faces pressed against each other. You would have hands gripping the overhead bars. Sometimes your body would press against strangers. Sometimes elbows against somebody's ribs. Sometimes someone's back could be against my back. And all of this in the first class compartment. So the first class and the second class are the two classes of travel in the Bombay local, and obviously the first class is much more expensive than the second class. But in terms of the crowding, the difference, as I used to call it, between first class and second class is that on the first class you get to stand on 2 feet, and in the second class you get to stand on 1 foot or maybe half a foot. So it might sound terrible when I describe it, especially if you're not familiar with this. But there is an upside to this. The biggest upside is that you cannot fall because the people around you are always holding you up. And somehow, as you get used to it over a period of time, something changes in the way a person approaches these trains. It is as if you're part of something larger than yourself. The entire ecosystem of the train is something which operates at a level and scale which is otherwise unimaginable when you view it from an individual's perspective. What you would also see on these trains are people from all kinds of backgrounds. You would have workers, you would have students, you would have professionals, you would have railway persons going to work, you would have elderly people, you would have CEOs, you would have businessmen, you would have stockbrokers. And I was fortunate to have traveled with a host of these kind of people. I mean, I remember, specifically that each person would have a designated place, a designated coach, usually a designated spot where they would stand or subsequently sit if the seat got empty. And this was just a part of the day-to-day life as it existed in the trains in Bombay. Most of the time, I got used to it and I got familiar with the operating mechanism. So I would know exactly the spot at which I had to get in. So standing in the same carriage, basically this was the place where I would say India really came in as one. CEO and maybe an unemployed guy all together using the same door, breathing the same air. It's not a small thing in India where, of course, there are a lot of people at every level, but this was something which became a part of my day-to-day life. Now, uh, now I spoke about the first stop at Dadar. Dadar was perhaps the most crowded station because it was a junction between Central Railway and Western Railway, and you always had hordes of people moving from the Central Line to the Western Line for the interchanges that they had to do in Dadar. I spoke about the dabbawalas basically carrying home cooked food, maybe taking it 40-50 kilometers from let's say a wife in Virar cooking for her husband whose office would be in Churchgate. And I was lucky to have witnessed this. And all of this was in an era where mobile phones were just about coming in. There was certainly no GPS, no apps, no AI. I was lucky to have a mobile phone at that point of time, but usually when the train was crossing Andheri, the signal was quite bad, and calls would get dropped around Andheri. And collectively, everybody with a mobile phone on the train would start saying hello, hello, hello multiple times because the calls would start getting dropped. Now, why am I narrating all this? It's not to talk about the Mumbai local alone, because that's something most of us are familiar with. But it's something where things and people used to come together in a manner that was not otherwise imaginable in our society. Let me take a minute to talk about the ladies' special trains or the ladies' compartment. Sometimes half the coach was a first class coach, the other half was the ladies' portion. And, if you just observe, there would be a lot less chaos in a ladies' compartment than what it would be otherwise. So you had, once I asked my sister, who I was living with, that why did she believe that the ladies' compartment was less chaotic, even though there were perhaps just as many people in the ladies' compartment as in the general compartment. And she looked at me and said that that is what inherently women are. And she looked at me and said also that why is water wet? This question is something like that. So the other thing she said, and I want to take a minute to talk about it, is that in a ladies' compartment, she said we don't have to fight for space, because for those 20, 30, 40 minutes, we can just sit. In one way, the life of every woman who was traveling on those trains became free because you wouldn't be, a little bit more comfortable if you're not in that super dense crush load where you had everybody just jostling for the smallest of spaces. Now, this was a railway. This was my life every single day. This railway held me. It also held everyone else. And I want everybody on this talk to remember this, that this feeling of a railway that holds everyone together is a feeling which is very, very important. Because the story that I'm going to tell you of the next iconic train is about the trains which held no one. These are the trains which my family was a part of. I was not a part of them, but my parents, my grandparents were a part of. And these were the trains where my family barely survived. So that's the second set of trains I want to talk about. But before I do that, I want to show you these pictures. These are pictures of pre-1947 Lahore. You can see on the left-hand side a place called Anarkali Bazaar. Then in the center, you can see a very famous temple, which was in the Santnagar area, close to where my father was born. This is in the mid-40s. And on the right-hand side, of course, you can see the board of the Lahore railway station, which incidentally has English, has Lahore written in English, Lahore written in Punjabi, Lahore written in Hindi, and Lahore written in Urdu. And that kind of encapsulates also the demographics of Lahore at that point of time. And, this was a bustling, alive city. My father and mother, both sides of my family, my father's side as well as my mother's side, both of them are from Lahore. Let me correct it. Both of them were from Lahore because suddenly it was no longer their home. Because what happened was that, as you can see here in these pictures, there is a person who you can see on the left-hand side. His name is Cyril Radcliffe. He was appointed by the British government to draw out the boundary between India and Pakistan, both on the east as well as on the west, and to really determine which part would be in India and which part would move to Pakistan. Now, as you can see in the second image from the right, the plan was to look at two broad areas, the Punjab side on the west and the Bengal side on the east, as the places where the maximum amount of work was required. There was a border around Jammu and Kashmir, also around Rajasthan, but relatively the magnitude of the issue was much more on the Punjab side and on the Bengal side, as you can see. So Radcliffe came to India for the first time in 1947, stayed here for about 5 weeks, and drew a line. The Radcliffe line kind of cut through Punjab on the west. People were not sure which part would stay in India, which part would go on to become a part of Pakistan. As far as Lahore was concerned, and I want to come back to the story of my family and millions of people like them, people were not sure because Lahore had a population which was kind of almost equally split between Muslims on one side and Hindus and Sikhs. So if you looked at the demographics, they were more or less equally split, maybe something like a 51-49. So many people believed that Lahore would become a part of India. And therefore, while there was trouble brewing, I think people in Lahore for a lot of for a long period of time, perhaps thought that this would not, they would not have to move, and Lahore would become a part of India. To some extent, my family was kind of in the same belief, but as things got worse over the next few weeks in the summer of 1947, and the Ratcliffe line was drawn, the British were ready to leave. Suddenly, 15 million people had to move. 15 million people, east to west and west to east. My family was a part of that movement. My mother, who was 2 years old at that point in time, and my father, who was five, accompanied by their parents, so my grandparents and their brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts, they were a part of that movement. The movement was essentially to go from Lahore to Amritsar. The distance is less than 50 kilometers by train. And what happened was that this 50 kilometers turned out to be perhaps one of the most difficult journeys that not just people from my family had to endure, but millions of other people would have to endure as well. So you could see chaos at the Lahore station, crowds, luggage, desperation visible all around. Many people from our family, on my mother's side, waited at Lahore station. Specifically, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, my mother, waited at Lahore station for 3 days, sleeping on the platform, no schedule. There was no clarity on whether a train would come, when it would come. They were just rumors. This train is going, that train is not going, this train is attacked, that train is not attacked. Wait here, don't wait. It was a lot of uncertainty. My grandfather, like many other fathers of that time with small children, had the responsibility to take care of a large family. My mother was two, and finally, when a train came, grandfather lifted his children, my mother who was two, her elder sister who was a little elder, and pushed them through the window into a coach. And then my grandmother somehow managed to get onto it, then her sister, and then eventually my grandfather got onto that train. There were no seats on that train. There was barely room to stand. Some people sat down on the floor. But even after the train was packed, the train did not move. It did not move for 2 hours. And then the train started moving. So what you can see is two representational images from those times. These are the partition trains. So you can see an overcrowded refugee train. If you see the faces, the fear is the most dominant emotion of anybody on that train. My mother, of course, was too young to remember as a child. Her elder siblings remember the silence. A train full of people, but on its 50-kilometer journey from Lahore to Amritsar, almost nobody speaking. Just perhaps the sound of the train moving, the sound of the wheels, sometimes a child crying, and the smell. My mother's elder sister, she used to tell me the story. She remembered the smell. Too many people, too afraid to move. And the train would keep stopping on that 50-kilometer journey multiple times, most of the times in the middle of nowhere. Of course, there was no explanation. People would speculate. Is this an attack? Is somebody coming? Is there a likelihood of violence? And then the train somehow would start moving again. And this is how they reached Amritsar, a 50-kilometer journey which took 11 hours. And when they got off, they had basically left everything that they had behind. Uh, My grandfather, of course, used to speak about it a lot. Much later, my mother asked him that what did he see on those trains? What did he feel on those trains? I think the only thing that he used to say was that we were lucky. That's all. We were lucky because, there were many people who were not as lucky. These are some images which you can see from those trains, which still fail to give a sense of the magnitude that was, that people had to experience as they scrambled to get onto these trains. Now, what would happen in this case is a natural phenomena that somebody would make it and somebody wouldn't. And that is what happened in our family as well. So, my grandfather's brother, he kind of stayed back because he thought he would, there were a few things he could sell at home. He was trying to wind up things. And he asked my mother, father, and everybody to move so that they could get onto that journey. And, he said he would follow in 1 or 2 days. Uh, he stayed behind to sell the belongings and to get whatever money he could. But then he did apparently board a train. The train moved for about 10 kilometers and then stopped in the middle of a field. Armed men appeared, they boarded the train, and essentially there was a massacre. And most of the people on that train did not make it alive to Amritsar. So, so that was the journey. Now, the image that you see here, is from one of the trains which reached Amritsar, but a train on which every husband, every father had been killed. And so this is at Amritsar railway station of essentially people who had lost the male members of their family, and women and children waiting for next instructions, completely lost on what to do next. So I think uh, this is the journey which a lot of people undertook. Many people endured, and then I want to show this white blank because this is for those people who did not arrive. On the left hand side, you see those who arrived, but on the right hand side are those who did not. Because, as my grandfather said, we were lucky, they arrived. They arrived alive. And that's why I'm here. I'm here because of a stroke of luck that the train which was carrying my father and mother somehow made that 50-kilometer distance without them getting killed. Now, that's how I'm here. And this is not because the families were braver, not because they were smarter, but because the train made it with living passengers. And when looked at in the context of so many trains that did not make it with living passengers, you just it just puts things in perspective, and you realize that the train made such a difference to the lives of my family. I want to move on to the third story. This is train 3, and I call this India Goes Home. This story is from March, April 2020. Now, I want to show you a few pictures. This is the first one. This is from the 24th of March, 2020, when COVID had just started being a massive issue in India. The first COVID case was detected in February 2020 in Cochin, and then the virus spread. So essentially, 24th of March, 8 p.m., we had Prime Minister of India declaring a national lockdown. And what did a lockdown mean? People just did not know what was the implication of a lockdown, what a lockdown meant. It meant empty roads, like you can see here on the third image. It meant even the most iconic places in India, like India Gate here, as you see in Delhi, completely closed. This is an image from March 2020. It meant stations completely empty. Trains stopped running. This is an image from Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, Bombay VT, in March 2020. Not a single passenger. And when you view it in the context of the super dense crush load that a Bombay local would typically, be that would be the hallmark of a Bombay local. This just tells you that something is perhaps going very differently than what it has been in the past. Nobody on the streets, and if somebody had to be on the streets, there was a very difficult situation that people had to go through. There were very strict protocols for people being out of home, and many a time people who had to go even for basic errands were subject to a lot of harassment and brutality when the lockdown of March 24th was announced. The lockdown was announced at a 4 hours notice at 8 p.m. and by 12:01 a.m., in 4 hours and 1 minute, every suburban train in India had stopped. The Mumbai local, which we just spoke about, for the first time in perhaps a century, the Mumbai local stopped completely. Empty platforms, as you can see. And the people who used to use these trains had nowhere to go. They really had nowhere to go because many people get onto the Mumbai local because if you're on it, then you're earning your daily wages and then you're eating food at night. But when everything's closed around you, what do? And this was the situation. At the same time, while this situation was unfolding, the COVID cases in India were increasing dramatically. Dramatically to the extent that India started running short of hospital beds. And that is when the Indian Railways came up with a brilliant idea that as the nation struggled with its health infrastructure, stationary trains became COVID isolation wards. Initially, because all trains were stopped, the coaches were available. About 5,000 coaches were converted, providing about 80,000 beds, with each coach designated to hold about 16 patients. Each coach was modified by removing the middle berth, adding mosquito nets, equipping them with oxygen cylinders, equipping them with medical supplies. There was some modification done to the design of the toilet. One toilet was converted into a bathroom, and the cabins were fitted with some extra bottle holders, coat hooks, foot operated dustbins, and an arrangement to have IV fluids get onto a patient. And remember, it was a time which was now April. Most of India is very hot in the month of April. And so to combat heat, some of the coaches had bamboo or khaskhas mats installed on the roofs and on the sides of these trains. Of course, these coaches were designed for patients with mild symptoms, and these had to be at stations which were at locations where there was reliable water and reliable electricity. This was something which was unexpected from the railways.
Deepak, we have 10 minutes more.
Yeah. This was something unexpected from the railways and from the trains. But nevertheless, I think it was something that was being done, but it was not the core job that the railways were supposed to do. For that, I want to move you to the next slide, in which you see these images. You see the image here of people trying to get onto a makeshift truck, somehow trying to get home, because the city was no longer welcoming of its migrants. All the people who would crowd the Bombay local, the Calcutta locals, all the suburban trains, all the day-to-day work, those people suddenly had no work. The city was no longer home. It was just a workplace, opaque, cruel, and in April of 2020, diseased, because the disease was essentially spreading through the cities. The migrants who were in the city to work there thought that we need to get out of here. We need to get out of here whichever way we can. And this is one way that people thought maybe it's good to get out. Then you had some buses being run, thousands of people trying to get onto these buses and move. Whosoever could not get onto a bus, could not get onto a train, started walking. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. People started walking tens of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers, some people thousands of kilometers in the brutal heat of April and May 2020 so that they could get home. In some cases, and this is something which I was working with a group of volunteers, which we even organized for some people to go home on flights which were operational. So while all this was happening, trucks, buses, walking, flights, there was one mode of transport which was conspicuous by its absence. And that is the mode of transport which was missed the most. Finally, when the railways decided to run trains to shepherd the migrants of India from wherever they were to home, these trains were operationalized in May 2020. The Shramik Specials became one more way to get home. Shramik in Hindi means worker. So basically it was kind of a worker train or a labor train. And the Indian Railways made arrangements to start running these Shramik Specials. As you can see in the second image, going onto these trains was subject to a lot of COVID protocols. There was screening, you had to be negative, you had to maintain all your documentation because it was very, very bureaucratically intense. And then you had to maintain those social distances. You had people with the mask and a packet, some meager belongings that they would have queuing up in front of trains. And you can see those red circles as the woman with her two children is walking. Those red circles were meant for people to maintain that distance as COVID stuck. So when the railways finally, we had the political leadership of the country taking a decision to start moving the trains, that is when this action started. And these Shramik Specials became one more way for people to start getting home. Now just look at these images. I want you to remember a few things. India has about 100 million migrant workers. These workers build the cities, they clean the cities, they feed the cities, they cook the cities, they ride the local train every morning. They are invisible to the people standing next to them, but absolutely essential to the place that they live in. And because of the lockdown, they had no place to stay and no means to go. And this is when, the entire set of things in terms of roads, buses, walking, finally trains in May. That is when it started. So when the Shramik Special started, I was, even though I was not in the railways at that point of time, I was leading a group of volunteers and working with some organizations to help people go from Hyderabad. Uh, it was it was an experience that I've never had before. Thousands of people came to the stations, family with everything that they owned, children, elderly, pregnant women, people who had been sleeping rough for weeks, exhausted, dirty, desperate. And then you needed to go through the bureaucracy. The registration was chaotic. You needed approval from the Telangana government to leave. You needed approvals from the home state to arrive, Aadhaar cards, online registrations, OTPs. Half the people didn't have smartphones. And then in the midst of all these trains were subject to very strict COVID protocols. So a coach which could typically accommodate 72 people because of the distancing norms could take a maximum of 48 to 54 people. And that's where you had a situation that even though the train was running, even though the number of trains was inadequate, each of them was only going with a limited number of people. Now, that was the protocol, and that's what everybody was trying to do their best on. But as a result of that, while everyone was doing everything right, it was still killing people. And this is where, while the inside of a train, like you can see, is perhaps a place where people were following protocols with distances, the outside of the train had hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people waiting in the heat. And for every train that left, properly spaced and properly sanitized, following every guideline, there were perhaps twice as many people who were left behind because the mathematics, the arithmetic was just impossible. Millions of people needed to travel, and there were just simply not enough trains at that point in time. Overall, these trains ran from May to August 2020. More than 4,500 trains ran. 6.5 million people were transported to their home states. And because these trains were on demand, so certain state governments which were more proactive in requesting the railways and the central government to move the trains, we had different experiences for the trains which went from different states in the country. Now, of course, this was 6.5 million people is a huge number. But in spite of that, there were issues, there were controversies, there was criticisms on the management, especially on long delays, lack
Deepak,
of
only a few
water.
minutes more.
Yes. And on these trains, about 97 passengers, as per official figures, died during the journey. So those are the three iconic trains I wanted to talk about. The question really is, who does the railway carry? Each iconic train has a story. The Bombay local is a story about a train that carries everyone every single day. It is perhaps one of the best examples of democracy in action where everybody comes together. And then you had these partition trains, the trains that did try to carry everyone, some alive and some dead. And then we had these COVID trains, which could not carry everyone because the scenario at that point of time unfolded in a manner which was very different. I just want to end by saying that in 2018, I wrote a book called The Boy Who Loved Trains. I wanted to narrate these three stories because that boy in me is still there. He fell in love with trains because trains meant connection, because they promised that a journey was possible. I'm also the grandson of refugees who survived the partition trains and a former railway official and a volunteer who stood in COVID looking at desperate people trying to get onto trains in impossible heat, knowing that it was not enough. So I conclude as all the three individuals. I have spent my life loving trains, with it, in it, for it. This love was not diminished by what I saw in 2020. If anything, it only deepened because love without honesty isn't love. And that, to me, is the story of the three iconic trains which will keep running. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Deepak. When we first understood this topic for today's conference, we never imagined that the three iconic trains you would talk about would be part of this. We thought of all kinds of trains like Orient Express and Frontier Mail and so on, but we never, it would never have occurred to us that what you talked of are also iconic trains. There are a few comments. David Charles writes, it's a tragic story that we all know. He is referring to the Partition trains. But to hear you tell it, Deepak, is very moving, and I have tears in my eyes. I would like to add to that I'm also one of the 15 million people who moved from one country to the other. Of course, I don't remember anything. I was 1 year old then. I was born in Rawalpindi, which is now in Pakistan, and my family moved a little before August 47 to the Indian side. My father being in the army, there was no physical danger to my family. That is my mother and my sisters. There was no danger because we were in an army train. But even this army train, I'm told by my elder sister, who's 10 years older than me, was standing in Lahore for 10 days. It moved from Rawalpindi to Lahore in about 2 weeks and then stood in Lahore for 8 days because you didn't know what was ahead. So being an army train, there was no physical danger that you would get killed because there were soldiers in the train. But the train could move. It was just standing in Lahore. And my sister said that from the train window, they could see trains on the other platform with dead bodies hanging out, people bleeding, people running around, all kinds of things. It's one of the most horrifying things that could have happened. Then Vibha Mitra writes, thank you very much. Very knowledgeable. Thoroughly enjoyed. Venkateshwaran Anand says, railway doctors work day and night at hospitals. 2 doctors succumb. Atulya Sinha says, great presentation, Deepak, very touching. Apurva Bahadur says, very moving presentation. And Verafullah says, a sad ending to a lively conference. But that's life. Anyway, thank you very much, Deepak. I would only like to end by mentioning one item. I know of one other occasion when a railway platform, which is normally absolutely brimming with people, was absolutely empty. And that is when the Delhi Junction station, they converted from physical signals to route-related walking. For 24 hours, the station was closed. And one of our members, he was smart enough to go to the station, he was a railwayman, and he took photographs of that station where it was totally empty. We ran a feature in our magazine some 4 or 5 years back called Then and Now. It had a picture of the station normally when you had 1 million people on a platform, and on the side of it, a picture of that day when it was absolutely empty. Not a single train, not a single person on the platform. So I imagine that on COVID days, there must have been something like that. But since nobody could go out and photograph, I could not get any photographs of that period. But we have this picture of when Delhi Junction station, which is an extremely busy station, for 24 hours, there was no movement, there were no people, there were no trains. So again, thank you very, very much, Deepak. And we come to the end of a very, very lively day and a very, very lively conference.
The result of the quiz.
Yes, I was coming to that. Yeah. I will just show the results of the quiz.
So the first question was about the distance between the first train in India ran between Mumbai and Thane, and the distance was 34 kilometers. And which station holds the world record for the longest platform, which is Hubli Junction? Which locomotive class is the most powerful electric loco in India? That is WAG 12B. Which country has the largest high-speed network in the world? That is China. Which is the highest railway bridge in the world, which is Chenab? Which railway zone has the largest route length, which is the Northern Railways? Which Indian station has the highest number of platforms, which is Howrah Junction? Which is the longest railway tunnel in India, is Pir Panjal Tunnel? Which train is considered the fastest operational tunnel, which is the Vande Bharat Express? Which railway station has the longest name? So it is Sri Venkat Narasimha Rajuari Peta. Which railway production unit manufactures Vande Bharat trains, which is the integral coach factory? Which train route is known as the longest train route in India by distance, which is Vivek Express from Dibrugarh to Kanyakumari? Which locomotive factory produces the WAG-12 electric locomotive, which is the Madhepura electric locomotive factory? Which is the oldest operational station in India, which is Royapuram station? Which class of broad gauge locomotives was designed and built entirely in India, which is the WG? Which class of steam locomotive was specially designed for high-speed passenger services on Indian broad gauge after independence, which is WP? Which the Fairy Queen locomotive, that is EIR 22, belongs to which wheel arrangement, which is 222? Which Indian Railway locomotive had 462 Pacific wheel arrangement, which is the WP? Which steam locomotive used the 282 Mikado wheel arrangement, which is WG? Which locomotive class was known as the most successful meter gauge steam locomotive for freight trains, which is the YG? The last steam locomotive manufactured in India was manufactured in which year? So that was 1972. Which locomotive class was designated for missed traffic duty, that is floated passenger on the broad gauge? So that is WL. Okay. Which workshop built the first indigenous steam locomotive in 1895, which is Jabalpur workshop? Which railway company built the first railway workshop in India, that is 1862, that is East Indian Railway? The famous WP locomotive Akbar, which is WP 7161, was originally allocated to which railway zone, which is the Northern Railways? Which steam locomotive class was nicknamed the Green Pacific by the railway enthusiasts, that is the WP? Which Indian Railway steam locomotive class had the largest number of driving wheels used on Indian Railways, that is the WP? Which Indian Railway workshop built India's first steam locomotive boiler, which is Jamalpur workshop again? Which Indian Railway steam locomotive class was designed by William Stanier of LMS influence? This is WL. Last question. Which steam locomotive class was the largest broad gauge passenger loco built in India, which is WL? Okay. Now I will just show the results of the winners, the name of the winners. So,
unfortunately, we don't have the names of the winners. We only have their email
IDs. Yeah.
So we'll be addressing each of them. That is the up to number 7. We'll be addressing them and getting in touch and congratulating them and giving them what prizes will be given. I'll be getting in touch with all of them.
But the responses were very good. A lot of people responded to the quiz, and the other amount of people who have actually succeeded in getting through the quiz, 45 people. Yes, Jalsa.
Okay, we come to the end of 2 very interesting and successful days. Now to summarize the 2 days, I would like to hand over to our president, Mr. Venu Mathur. Over to you, Venu.